Greetings, YouTube, and welcome to my channel. Chester here, 45Y music composer and producer, and we got another video for you. Today we are going to go over Spitfire Audio's Fragile String Evolutions. This is another library that I put away a while back, got some dust on the shelf while it was sitting there, and so took it off the shelf and dusted off a little bit and started messing with it. So thought we'd deep dive on a little bit and go over the fun and some of the pain points and how we can achieve this library to help us out where we need it to. So let's get started. Fragile string evolutions. Delicate and haunting evolving chamber strings. These are long-winded sentences, by the way, but a collection of long, intensely beautiful chamber evolutions, perfectly complementing our other evolutions libraries, while also thriving as its own compositional tool. Good grief. But there's some truth here to the thought. So delicate and haunting evolving chamber strings, very similar to that of Oliver Arnold's Evolutions, which was kind of doing that too. They're similar but different. I mean, this is a chamber library, whereas that original Evolutions, not chamber evolutions of Oliver Arnold's, but the Evolutions, that was just like a quartet or a quintet or something like that. Much smaller group of, much smaller ensemble, ultimately. And then recorded in a dry vintage craft acoustic of Aradel Studios with the UK's finest progressive string players. We have captured the more delicate, subtle aspects of each instrument by using a range of avant-garde techniques, giving you the tools to create the most realistic and spine-tingling string textures. I like this sentence a lot more than that first one about this library. Originally, when I got this library, it was hard for me to place it. I didn't really understand it. I didn't know what I was ever going to use it for. That's ultimately why it got on the shelf in the first place. But I think this is the sentence that really helps me understand it. The delicate, subtle aspects of these instruments and the avant-garde techniques, creating more realistic and spine-tingling string textures. And not spine-tingling in the sense of horror music, though you could apply it to that. I think it's just more the interest, honestly. It just the way it sounds and what you can get with it by dialing it in. Presented in our own sophisticated GUI with an ingenious grid layout, you have an almost infinite number of configurations at your fingertips. The Spitfire team has also created a range of straight-out-of-the-box presets, offering you instant playability and inspiration. Nothing against Spitfire team or the folks that made these presets, but we'll talk more about that whole paragraph here in my review. Demos were okay. Looked like they needed some of the other libraries to help them out, which I think that's a strength to this library, is the way that it layers in with others. So the demos do kind of give you that. It's hard to play on its own. It is. I'll show you why. All right, Paul Thompson's walkthrough is fantastic. If you're interested in this library has given you any thought to getting it, I would recommend his walkthrough. Paul Thompson could walk through a phone book and it would be awesome. I really always admire his walkthroughs. He does an incredible job with them. They get long and it's still worth it to spend the time and go over those. The in-depth, Oliver's in-depth is pretty fantastic too. It's good to walk through and see the libraries that he's using. He does use fragile strings a little bit in his piece, but not very much of it. There's a couple presets that he's using, and he does a good job explaining them. So it's a good watch, but you might be fast forwarding a little bit, and you're only going to get a hint of what this library does in his in-depth. 32 minutes, by the way, and it's probably 7 minutes of him using it at most. I'm not going to read through all this, but I will say a couple things to note here, because the link will be in the description, so feel free to click it and read through this yourself. But you can see the ensemble that they used to perform the evolutions, how it was recorded. I might have said the studio wrong. I am not familiar with it, so forgive me if I did. And if you had a good chuckle, you're welcome. But let's see here. They talk about so it was previously known as EvoGrid 2. So this is a repackaged library that has been given to us. That was one thing I noticed that I thought was interesting. Another one was, I really enjoyed reading this. Christian Henson felt the need for a straight note that just did something every once in a while at random intervals to give the sense of life and movement within any scene. I thought that was really cool, and it's probably one of the greatest explanations I've heard of Evo grids and evolutions in these libraries. And that's why I think they're so fantastic. The ability to kind of either drone notes and get something out of them, or provide chord progressions and experience movement with these chord progressions. I'm holding notes longer than I typically would with an original library just to get something out of the evolution. And that has caused me, every time I pull one of these libraries up, to think a little bit differently when I'm composing music and extending my chord progressions out every now and then because of the articulations and of the intricacies of an evolution. It's pretty fantastic stuff. And it feels really rewarding when you find it and it's added into your production. If you've experienced that feeling, I think you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't yet, some of these Evo grids, they're worth looking into and diving in and experiencing. And if they're not for you, that's totally okay. In fact, some of these might not be. And we'll go over that in more detail through this review, whether this library would be working for you or not. All right, so yeah, feel free to read the rest. What is an Evo grid? Things like that can all be explained by Spitfire Audio. I'm not going to do that too much. I did a little bit of that in my ambient guitars review. You can check that out on my page. The included presets, you can't dial any of these up individually, so it's good to look at and review. The mics is probably the best part of this, though, and we'll talk about these mics as we go into the UI. So I'm not going to dive into them, but they're going to be very interesting for later. Tech specs. All right, so here's the Mac and PC system requirements. Review those. If you fit the requirements, then congrats. You would be eligible for installing this library on your machine and enjoying it. If you don't get FOMO and don't worry about it, because there are plenty of libraries out there for you. And if one is out there meeting your requirements, use it and enjoy it and be happy. It's okay. Don't get the FOMO. That's why we do reviews and making sure that you know if you're missing out or not, right? So, but I want to show the tech specs here because I don't want to get anyone's hopes up if they're not on, for example, 1010 at the very least, and interested in this library. You probably are. You probably are at this operating system, but just in case, I'm on 10.14, right? So it's not unheard of. File size, 27 gigs. It's a good amount of real estate for a library like this. This library is kind of like, you can think of it like in your spice rack. It's one of your spices. Might not be that main one. It might not be cumin or cayenne pepper or salt, seasoned or otherwise, or Old Bay, anything like that. It's going to be something a little more, I don't know, like caraway seeds or something like that. It's going to be something that you're going to need when you need it. Fennel seeds, we'll say. It's going to get you something when you need it, but you're not always going to be reaching for it, right? So I don't have this on my to-go rig, my laptop, for example. It's not the needed libraries. It's definitely nice to have. So it sits on my studio computer, and I do access it from there. But just a little blurb on tech specs and requirements that I wanted to go over. And then here's some, I love that they do this. It says it sounds great with these examples. I got this in a bundle with, I think, Studio Brass and Sparkling Woodwinds, Abbey Road Sparkling Woodwinds. And it sounds pretty good with those. And then also I have in my session we'll load up, I have a couple other libraries that aren't these that I think it sounds good. I have to have this this manual up because there's a bug defect, at least I think there is, where I don't get to see what the evolutions are. And that's really unfortunate. We'll go over it as I open up the UI. So I have to have this manual kind of up when I use this so I can understand what I'm loading. Long story short, I am dealing with that right now. So now that we're in the session, we're talking caveats, and I'm just introduced you to one. So let's finish that one up and get into others here. And let me mute the other libraries real quick so we're not hearing them. All right, so I'm going to load up the interface, and the first thing I want to show you is, so in Paul Thompson's walkthrough, he showed a very hip, important thing where if you're here and you roll over any of these evolutions, these pegs or these dots, it will explain what it is. And I haven't been able to, let me see, maybe if I hold a key, no, yeah, see, I'm not getting that. I'm not getting it explaining what each of these sounds are. And that's very unfortunate for me because I want to dial in a preset. That's how I found use for this in the first place, is dialing in something that would fit my music rather than using a specific preset. And I can't do that if I don't know what they are. So I have to use my ears, and that's fine, right? We use our ears all the time, so it's nothing different. But time savings for me to know what I'm loading would be fantastic. So I don't know if this is a bug defect or if I'm doing something wrong, but it would be awesome if I can get that working. So I have the user manual kind of available on one of my monitors so I can see, what's going on. Next caveat, let's just go over the UI, and then we'll go into more details on this. So the first kind of thing is memory in disk space and CPU. I do observe these, so I leave the UI somewhere where I can peek it. But when I'm initially loading up sounds, the one thing about these UIs, we can't purge our samples like we can in Contact. Spitfire community has been pretty vocal about this with the company, and that is kind of a caveat and kind of a thing to note and understand. So if you're a longtime Contact user, you don't get that ability, which is unfortunate. But otherwise, there are a lot of things about this UI that are very similar, if not pretty much the same as Contact. For example, you do have expression control and dynamics control, and you can use, like, I use this naked board MIDI controller, for example, for both of those. Very common. This one knob thing, you can assign any of these settings to it. I just leave it at reverb. I don't even use this. So if you do, then that's an option for you. Just noting it, but I don't typically. I set that somewhere else, so I'm not too worried about that knob. Down here is the evolution board itself. How we set up our evolutions. And like I said, I'm sorry if you don't know what this is. I'll kind of be going over it, but there are better videos somewhere on YouTube for that. So with this, we have three types of like evolutions. We have the traditional evolutions, which are going to be like the more tame string sounds and articulations. And then we have episodic, which is more in the middle. We're not tame, but we're not fiercely in avant-garde land. We're kind of somewhere in the middle. And then extreme are going to be the real intense articulations and the avant-garde evolutions where you can get pretty wild as you're going into these. So depending on what you're playing or what part you are in your arrangement, that's where you're going to start dialing these in and seeing where you want to be. And then command or control if you're on PC, but you hold that down and you click any one of these rows and it will just peg the whole row for you. So you would get that same evolution wherever you're playing on the keyboard. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so back to it. So you would be able to play anywhere on this keyboard and you hear that evolution. And these are these key sets that based on that particular evolution, these specific keys would play, and then you can start adjusting those. So we can get like some here, this one plays this one plays that one, and then you see how they populate on the keyboard for you. So you can review those and see. So that's an extreme one. Up here is episodic. Everywhere else is traditional. And that's what Paul Thompson actually suggests in the walkthrough is set up some traditional over the keyboard, and then in certain areas where you want to hear like an extreme articulation or evolution or an episodic one, select those, and then as you play your chord progression, you're going to get like this. Now, I do have the extreme going in a very active part of my chord progression, so I probably wouldn't set that. I'd probably go back to this. And I would probably set it like there. There we go. But that's one of the points of this library that I'm trying to say is it gets intense very fast. So there's a lot of tuning, refining, dialing, getting things right. And that brings me to another caveat. The presets are fantastic. What comes with this. So I'm not trying to pick on anything here when I say this, but I didn't think the presets were very useful for me. The presets themselves are fantastic. You start loading, I'm not going to do it in light of time, but you start loading up these presets and you start performing them, and they sound great. They're a lot of fun. But when you start saying, okay, well, I need to make like a piece or a piece of music, and you're looking at maybe a score or you're looking at like some media that you're scoring to, the presets aren't going to always be helpful to you because, like I said, this is like caraway seeds or fennel seeds that you're trying to put on a dish. You need the right amount. You need the right you need the right flavor, right? So you're gonna be dialing this in more so than not. So that's where the presets, they're fantastic, they're great, but they're not always there for you, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit. So I don't use presets at all, and there's no way to initialize the preset. You just kind of now have this library in, and I'm just going to forever kind of use it and set it up and dial it in to make it work for me. So here we have the same effects that we do in Contact. Back with the Contact patches, you have saturation, delay, which I took out completely because that can get busy very fast. If you like the delay, add it in for sure. There might be times where I use it, but for the most part, I'm going to turn it off and actually not have it. So I'm going to actually turn that off. And then a little bit of reverb, because why not? And then here we have the 4 mics, and this is actually a plus to the UI that I've really appreciated and enjoyed thoroughly, is I can put my mouse on anything other than that bug defect that we talked about, but you can put your mouse on kind of anything here, and it gives you a really good description of what you're looking at. And I love that for the mics, because I'm always going to the manual saying, well, what does this mic do? How is it recorded? So I can make a decision, an educated decision on will I use it or not, or what it will give me. And then I listen to it and make those decisions, of course. But it's good to know what's here, and that's where I really enjoy this part of the UI. So I can read about it and go, oh, well, that sounds good. Let's try it. Then you have your ADSR, which is fantastic. And then this variation knob also along with it to vary the sound of a technique. And I don't know what they're altering. That would be nice to know, but it's totally fine. I just turned that down quite a bit because this library alters so much already as it is. It's good to kind of maintain some sort of control on the sounds I'm getting, right? So I kind of turned that down, and I'm trying that out for a little bit. And then over here we have effects. So like those effects we looked at, we can turn them off just by unclicking them, so that evolution would then not have that effect that's set up. There's also volume adjustments. So that would be good for up here, actually. You'd probably turn those off if you had delay down here, for example, maybe just an option. Volume, you can turn those. Sometimes you notice these extremes get pretty loud, so you can turn those down while you're keeping these others up. I won't be doing that too much myself, but sometimes I can see myself needing that. And then you have panning options if you want to pan some of these around, which that's pretty cool if you need to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now let's go through this real quick. We have all these options, kind of these knobs set up in Ableton Live, and I made an update to my templates. I'm not using the Omic EQ anymore. I'm actually now all stock plugins. So if you've been following me and you're like, oh man, I don't understand why he uses those. I wanted my latency to be absolutely 0 samples and no fuss and just on each individual track. I still use Plugin Alliance through subgroups and bus mixing, but I kind of wanted just a real clean, simple individual track, let the track kind of have all the magic. So we're just using EQ8 and we're using utility plugin. Doing the same thing, gain staging and just simple high pass, low pass filtering. I'm not doing anything crazy here and I don't want to. I wasn't with the Omic either, but I just figured why not just keep everything just simple. And also the more of those EQ channel strips that I had, the more my CPU was going up. So this has helped me significantly with CPU as well. There we go. A little more volume for you. I apologize about that. Glad we caught it now. So I'll start with the close mic. I'll turn all these others off. Oh, we want to keep that up. And then, so I'll just leave that because that shows me like kind of the close mic sound, the true sound of it. So I can start making informed decisions on, is this the Evo grid that I want set? Are these the presets I want to hear going forward? That's what I'm looking for as I listen through these. It would be nice to know what they are. But so I have to keep this UI available to me. So I'm putting it on one of my monitors to the side here. So sorry if it's not in the way right now, but we'll start listening to it as I hear. And let's just say we found the preset. Maybe this is what I want. And so what I'll do now is there we go. What I'll do now is I'll take the close off and I put that tweaked one on because we read that that's compression and also the occasional glitch. So it's just a little more interesting. Ambient gives me a little more wider mix, just a slightly wider mix. Too much of it can actually sound pretty distorted, so I don't add too much. And then this distorted one's good for body and just getting a little something else in there. So you can mix that one in a little bit. Then that's where these two stretched mics get very interesting, and so they get explained very well in here. So this one is close mic stretch to be twice as long, giving all the sound a more ethereal quality. So it's just stretching the sample out more. And then times 8, it stretches it out 8 times the length, so turning the busy evolutions into lethargic smears. And that's pretty awesome too. So you'll want to dial those in. I wouldn't go too hot on them because that again can get really thick and crazy fast. Right? Like if I just did this, just takes the whole mix. So nice little amount of that, or this one's always pleasing, this times 2. Put that in there. All right, so that's how I'll start tweaking it and getting it set up and feeling good about it. And then I have it for a part or part of the piece, let's say 8 bars like I do here. The problem that I have with this library is that's as far as I really get with one patch or one preset, which is unfortunate. In Contact, when they were releasing these libraries, I was able to get the individual evolutions and load them up and be pretty happy with that. But here, I can only do it by just clicking this, and there it is. And then I have to duplicate and load another one, and then load another one. And then maybe I want to mix one. So in the middle of my arrangement, I now want one of those episodic or extreme evolutions in there. So now I have to load another one, duplicate it, and then set it up. And that's going to get CPU heavy kind of fast. It's going to get my memory going, RAM and usage and things like that. And that's okay. I mean, I'm going to plan for that. It's just going to cause me to maybe freeze and flatten and bounce some of the audio in place, right? But just know that that's going to kind of happen. You're going to get to a point where you're very thrilled about one of these presets. You're going to save it. Whether you save it in this GUI, I'm going to save it in Ableton Live. I don't use the GUI myself because I have all these other settings to save as well. But then I gotta do this again and again and again. And over time, that's going to take some time. And that time I could be using to produce, right? So keep that in mind with this library. If it was like the Contact ones back in the day where they gave you all the individual access to all the individual evolutions, I think you could get by pretty quickly and save yourself some time by just having those loaded up and ready to go. But here, not the case. We're going to have to keep duplicating these and setting them up again and again, which is not as fun. So that's pretty much my review on this library. There's some love. There's some not so much love. There's a lot to like with it. It's great textural library. It's great to blend in with other libraries. Here's an example. I'm a huge fan of London Contemporary Orchestra textures, which is another Spitfire library. That's the EvoGrid string library that I really enjoy if I'm going for avant-garde, different type of string library. And a review on this one soon. We'll definitely dive into this. But I had that loaded up just kind of to show that it's a fantastic library for this. And also the Stratus Oliver Arnold's piano library here. And 1 second, I'm going to dial it down a little bit to have it blend kind of with these libraries a little bit how I wanted it. So negative, let's just say 4 there. All right. So now we have this going. I think that crackling is coming from Stratus, not from these string libraries, just to be clear. All right, so that's pretty much brings us to the end here. So once again, this library is awesome if it's what you need it for. If you need some evolutions for strings in your arrangement, you want to make that a little more interesting. But it comes with a lot to dial in. It can get crazy quick, and if that's what you need, then this is a great option for you. If you're just lightly dialing things in and being careful with it, I think it can get you where you need it to go. You're just going to invest a little time in this library and making it help you in making your arrangements a little more interesting as you're kind of holding notes. Like I said earlier, it's fantastic for that. So that's kind of my review on this one. I hope this was interesting for you. I hope it helped you out. If you do own this library and you kind of put it on the shelf, hope some of this will help you out in dusting it off and giving it a second shot. I know I'm going to. It's not always going to be an option for me. I'm not always going to pick this one up. But when I do, I'm looking forward to dialing in some sounds and having fun with it. So please like and subscribe if any of these reviews help you out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.